How's it going, guys? You're watching Radiator, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favourite subjects, and that is radiators. Now, this is a follow-up video on the water blocks tutorial, so it'll be episode 2. And this one, however, is going to be a little bit more harder to follow to a degree. There's more information that you need to know. So what I'm going to do to make this video more digestible is break it up into sort of subcategories throughout the video, and hopefully by the end of the video, you should have a pretty good idea of what it is that you need to buy. Okay, so to kick this video off, let's talk about what a radiator actually does. What is its purpose? Now, you may be thinking, I've got radiators in my home and they heat up my home, so how could that possibly cool something down? Well, you're kind of right, but you're very, very wrong. So essentially, the way a radiator works is, obviously, let's take your house radiator. You get hot water that's pumped into the radiator. So from point A, the beginning, to the end of the radiator, you're going to have a temperature delta. So it's going to be hotter on the way in, cooler on the way out. And that's because the radiator is actually displacing the heat by radiating the heat from the radiator itself. Now, PC radiators and car radiators, they do exactly the same thing, just slightly more aggressively, as they have obviously fans which help aid in displacing that heat, because the purpose of this is to get the heat out as fast and as efficiently as possible. So for context, let's just show you how they actually work. You generally have an inlet and well, you'll always have an inlet and an outlet, but obviously different radiators have different sort of ports, so you can come up with some slightly different configurations, but for simplicity, let's just go with inlet and outlet. Now, the warm water comes in through the inlet, and then you'll see we have these various different lines coming down the radiator. Now, these are your radiator cores. This is where the water or fluid will actually travel through until we get to the outlet. Now, you may see here we have fins between each core. Now, the purpose of the fins is that they actually aid in exchanging the heat from the core to the fins. The heat's collected there and then it's pushed out with the fan. Now, this is what gives the radiator its efficiency. So obviously there's something called passive cooling, where if your radiator was big enough, you wouldn't need a fan. It would displace the heat on its own, very similar to your house radiators, but obviously these need to be a lot smaller, so that's why we have fans to aid and force that air out, force the heat out of the fins to keep this working as fast and efficiently as possible. So that is how a radiator works. If you don't understand that, leave me a message in the comments and I'll try to re-explain, but I'm pretty sure that makes sense to most people. So yeah, that's subject 1, how the radiator works, out of the way. Okay, so if you're in the market for radiators, you've probably already realised there's a very large selection of different size radiators, and you're probably asking yourself, what's the benefits and disbenefits between them all? Now, the rule of thumb with radiators is essentially bigger the better. And the reason for that is bigger the rad equals bigger the surface area. More surface area you have, the more efficient the rad will be at cooling down whatever it is you're putting through it. Now, for context, let's just say your case will only support a 240mm rad. So this is a 240mm. There are 2 ways that you can improve on this surface area. The first, most common one, will be obviously going for a slightly bigger thickness. So this is an SE and this is an EK XE. And as you can see, these are quite a bit different in thickness. This one is almost twice as thick as the SE. And the benefit you're going to have with this is quite simply surface area. You're going to have more surface area, which means it's going to have a larger cooling capacity than the SE. Now, the drawbacks to going for a thicker radiator is you will introduce more noise, because to be able to get the radiator to perform to its full potential, you're going to need to make sure that the fans that you choose have enough static pressure to be able to cope with the radiator. If you're putting weak fans on a radiator of this sort of size, it's just not going to perform as well as it should do, and in all honesty, you'll probably end up worse off. So you have to make sure that you're buying the right fans for the radiator, but generally speaking, higher the static pressure, the more noise you're going to introduce. So if noise is a problem, obviously you're going to have to find a nice equilibrium as far as it goes for noise / performance, but if noise is not an issue, just go as thick as you can. Now, the other way that you can increase the surface area is you'll notice on various different radiators, they have different FPI specifications. Now, FPI stands for fins per inch, and essentially that's the density. So higher the FPI, the higher fin density you'll have. Lower the FPI, the lower the fin density you'll have. But yet again, there's drawbacks and plus and minuses. If you're going for quite a high FPI radiator, then you're going to need yet again more static pressure to enable that radiator to perform to its full potential, which of course introduces more noise again. So just keep that in mind, making sure that your fan is very much compatible with the size of radiator that you're going for. Now the other thing as well, when you come down to thickness, so like we said, your case will support a 240mm fan radiator. You have to make sure that, say for instance, you have 60mm clearance between the top of the case and the motherboard. So 60mm is all the space that you've got to work with. You can't just go out and buy a 60mm thick rad, because obviously you're going to have to make sure that you're going to have the space to support the fans as well. Now, obviously you can have these either in a push or pull configuration, or you can do both push and pull. But obviously if you're going push-pull, then you're going to need to make sure that you have enough space to cater for 2 fans plus the radiator. So that's just another thing to bear in mind. You can obviously buy slimmer fans, but with slimmer fans, obviously you generally take a bit of a hit on static pressure. So you don't tend to find the slim fans like this with a great deal of static pressure performance. There are some good ones out there, but obviously it's if you're going for sort of a thick rad with high FPI, the slim ones probably won't cut it. You'll need to go for something a bit more beefier. So just something to bear in mind. Now, if you've got more freedom and you can go longer, obviously that's better, because you can go for a lower FPI, and the longer the rad, you can increase in the surface area so you can keep the noise right down. But obviously, yet again, if noise is not a problem, go slightly higher FPI, long as you can, as thick as you can, you're going to have a really nice performing rad. The other thing to bear in mind with radiators is obviously they all carry cooling capacity dependent on the surface area that they have. So if you're looking to what's called, let's say, a 30 series card and your CPU, especially with today's CPUs, that is going to generate a humongous amount of heat, which something like a 240, which in all honesty, it's very unlikely you're going to be restricted to a 240 this day and age with the cases that we have. But you have to make sure that you have enough cooling capacity to deal with the heat that you're generating. And in my opinion, like 30 series cards alone, they require a minimum of a 360 rad. I've got a 3090 Kingpin with the hybrid cooler, and just gaming on that with no overclock, after an hour or so, you can literally feel the radiator getting warm, which is an indication that it's becoming sort of pushed to its limit and it's starting to be overwhelmed. You're obviously going to get some residual heat over time, but it ultimately, the heat doesn't want to be stuck in the radiator. It wants to be, displaced into your environment. So it's just something to bear in mind. Make sure if you can only fit a 240 and you want to water cool a 30 series card in your CPU, it's just not going to happen. You're better off with the standard stock cooler that they come with. The only way that you're going to get around that is either by modifying the case to cope with a bigger radiator, or just starting again and buying a case that has the right amount of space for your needs. And generally speaking, there's a lot of cases on the market now that cater specifically for water cooling, in mind. So there's some really good choices to go for where you can have a lot of space. Now, the other thing that you'll notice when you're looking at sizes is you'll get this sort of scenario where you'll have a 360 rad and you'll have a 420. Now, essentially, you're thinking, well, they both take 3 fans, so why is there a size difference? All it is, the 360 will take 3 120mm fans, and the 420 will take 3 140mm fans. Now, the benefit to going for something like this is generally, obviously, well, first of all, you're increasing the surface area, so the performance is going to be slightly better. But also with it having a larger surface area with a shorter rad, then obviously you can go for lower RPM fans, providing you've got the FPI sort of where you want it to be. Lower RPM fans with a lower static pressure, so you can reduce the noise quite significantly. And then obviously if you're going on from there, like to the sort of 480s, yet again, the same sort of premise applies. So that is pretty much it for radiators as far as it goes for thickness, sizes, and what you need to be looking for when you're buying your first one. It can sound like a lot, but ultimately, once you've got your head around it, it's quite simple. Once you've broke it all down. Yeah, that's all you need to really know when you're looking for one on the market. And like I said, the only terminology that you're really going to see in the radiator side is FPI. You know what that means now. And then same when you're looking for your fans, it's obviously static pressure is what is going to work, is what the information that you need to know as how to get that radiator to best perform. I am going to do a separate video on fans on themselves, just because trying to tie fan specifications in with radiators all at the same time is an abundance of information. Obviously, we've touched on static pressure. There's more that goes into fans, but that's for another video. That's just all you need to know for the radiator alone. So yeah, moving on to the next subject. Okay, so with the information that we've just covered, obviously that should answer most questions that you have when shopping for a radiator and just help sort of streamline the process so you can find the right radiator for your build. I know it seems like a lot of information all at once and it's hard to get your head around, but if you break it down and just sort of go through it systematically and tick each box off as you're looking, it should streamline the process. If there's something though that you're stuck on or you're not quite sure about or you didn't understand, do leave me a message down below, and obviously I'll try my best to try and elaborate on that and help in any way that I can. But let's talk more about performance now. So when, let's just say for instance, you've got an abundance of space, but a 360 rad is more than capable of cooling what it is that you need to cool. So obviously, do you stick with 360 or do you go bigger again to a 480? The benefits that you're going to see, providing that the 360 can cope with what you've got comfortably, a 480 is not going to improve that cooling any more real world. So you're not going to see a scalable difference, really. The temperatures will look very much the same and you won't see a big performance gain. If you're looking for obviously aesthetics and looks and you want to fill a big space, you know, like you've got a big case and you can fit a massive rad at the top and you really want to fill that space, then obviously that's a different thing entirely. That, you know, go for it. You know, literally get as much as you can in there because it does look cool at the end of the day. But if you're looking at it for a performance gain, like you want to make sure that your money is being spent efficiently, then you're not going to see a difference. However, that only goes for people that are, you know, generally using PC under normal circumstances, whether it be gaming or if you're just using it for day-to-day stuff. If you're overclocking, that's when that can kind of change. Now, you're not going to see a massive performance jump as in cooling wise, because what you've got to remember is a radiator is only ever going to go down to temperatures as low as the ambient temperature in what your environment is. So if your room is 25 degrees, the lowest temperature that radiator can ever possibly reach is 25 degrees. Without introducing, you know, some type of exotic cooling, so whether that be an air conditioner or something like that, you're never going to go below that threshold. But what you will notice is that if you're into benchmarking and stuff like that, like I've had this loads of times, like where you sort of on the absolute limit for, you know, with water cooling anyway, you're on the limit and it's like the difference of 1 degree can be the difference between getting through that benchmark. If you've got, you know, a bigger radiator than what you need, what you are introducing is more volume of fluid. So very similar to how your kettle works, you know, you fill the kettle up halfway, it's going to boil far quicker than what it will be if you filled it to the top. Same sort of premise, slightly dialed down, but it will keep a more stable temperature. So what I tend to find is if I'm using a radiator that's only just coping with the rig that I've got at whatever particular time, the temperature scale for a benchmark you'll see sort of firing quite aggressively all over the place. However, when I've used bigger radiators like the MO-RO3 sort of series, they're a wicked example. You sort of see that temperature then sort of very streamlined goes up, so it's nowhere near as got the sort of aggressive spikes or the quick changes in temperature, which can just help make the rig more sort of stable for benchmark. So if you're into benchmarking and stuff like that, that's when performance-wise you will reap the benefits of having, you know, a stupidly big radiator. But apart from that, you're not really going to see the benefits. And like we were saying regarding cooling and stuff like that, aircon, air conditioners, they're a great way to bring the temperature of the room down and really get the PC cool. Obviously, if you want to surpass that, then you need to be moving away from this stuff entirely, and you want to be looking at sort of water chillers and stuff like that. Or if you really want to go next level for benchmarking, obviously you've got phase changes, dry ice, liquid nitrogen. They're all for a different video. Definitely keep them away from this subject to just not overcomplicate it. But yeah, definitely something that we'll be going through in the future, as that's something that does interest me quite a lot. So yeah, I will be honest, this video has been done in many takes. It's very hard, well, I personally find it very hard to kind of relay this information into terms that is simple to digest. And this is why I say, if there's anything that you're struggling with, I'm there for you in the comments. Just let me know. But I've tried the best I can. So take what you will, and obviously there is tons of videos on YouTube as well, sort of going through radiators and explaining them. So if there's anything that I've missed, have a look there, or just talk to me and I'll help where I can. But yes, we've tried to cover the bases of this one. Now, obviously, this was radiators. Like I said, I'm doing one on the whole system. So we've got reservoirs to go, different types of tubings, fittings, pumps, that's all to come in series down the line. So obviously, if you enjoyed what you've seen here today and it's been helpful, please do show some love and subscribe, like the video, turn on your notifications so you don't miss another one. That would be greatly appreciated. And as always, I thank you very much for watching. So yeah, thanks a lot, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers, bye.